We are starting with slide number 35 from the chapter 32 PowerPoint slides. And this should be the last recording for this chapter. So we were going over the composition of blood, and the blood consists of the fluid portion, which is plasma, and then the formed elements, which are the red blood cells, white blood cells, and platelets. So the red blood cells, or erythrocytes, are small biconcave disc. They lack a nucleus, and they contain hemoglobin, which is hemoglobin transports oxygen, and a small amount of carbon dioxide. Red blood cells are manufactured continuously in the bone marrow, the red bone marrow, not the yellow bone marrow. So it's the bone marrow that's found in the spongy bone, in the skull bones, the ribs, vertebrae, and the ends of long bones. Anemia is when the person doesn't have enough red blood cells or enough hemoglobin. And the hormone erythropoietin, or EPO, stimulates red blood cell production, and it's actually released by the kidneys. As far as your blood type, there's two parts of the blood type, and that is the ABO part and then the RH part. So you can either be blood type A, B, AB, or O, and then for each of those, you're positive or negative. And if you're A positive, that means that you have the RH antigen. So blood type is determined by the surface antigens on your red blood cells. So the surface antigens, there are three. There's A, B, and RH. So if you have all three of them, you're AB positive. But then if you have a different combination, it will change your blood type. So if you are blood type A positive, then you have the A antigen and the RH antigen. But if you're A negative, you've got the A antigen and you don't have the RH antigen. In your plasma, if you're blood type A, you're going to have antibodies to B antigens. So we call them anti-B antibodies. If you are type B, if you're blood type B, then you're going to have the B antigens on your red blood cells and the anti-A antibodies in your plasma. If you are blood type AB, you will have both A and B antigens on your red blood cells and no antibodies in your plasma. But then let's talk about if you're AB positive or if you're AB negative. So if you're AB positive, you're going to have, in addition to A and B, you're also going to have RH. But if you're AB negative, you will also have the RH antibody in your plasma. So anything that you don't have as an antigen on the surface of your red blood cell, you'll have an antibody for that in your plasma. Now, if you are blood type O, you will have neither A nor B antigens, and in your plasma, you'll have antibodies to both A and B. If you are getting a blood transfusion and they give you the wrong blood type, a cross reaction can occur, and that will cause the antibodies in your plasma will cause agglutination or clotting, and that can lead to organ damage. It can even lead to death. Now, in this picture, you're seeing that the person who's donating their blood is type A, so the donor blood is type A, and it has A antigens on the surface, and they're green and kind of rounded. And the donor blood also has anti-B antibodies. And notice in the antibody that there's like a V shape here in each of the two ends of the antibody. So since the recipient is also type A blood and they only have B antibodies in their plasma, the B antibodies are not don't have a shape that's going to bind to the A antigens on their red blood cells. So there's not going to be any clotting. But if you have A blood that's being donated to someone who is type B, they're going to have anti-A antibodies in their plasma. And you see how the ends here are of that Y-shaped antibody are rounded. So those antibodies are going to bind to the A antigens on the type A blood, and that's going to cause clotting. So that will cause a cross reaction. As far as the problems that can come up with pregnancy with the Rh system, if you have a mother that is Rh negative and their child is Rh positive, so the mother's Rh negative and the child is Rh positive, right? The first child that the mother has is going to be fine, but the mother's blood will start to build up antibodies to Rh. And if the mother has another child who's Rh positive, then her antibodies are going to attack the baby. They're going to attack the baby's red blood cells. So what they do is this is called, by the way, this is called hemolytic disease of the newborn. And so what they do is they give the mother who is Rh negative a shot called RhoGAM. And that is, they're basically giving her Rh antibodies so her immune system won't make more. So they can do that they can do that actually in the operating room when she has the first baby. They can give her the injection, but that will prevent a second baby from her blood attacking that second baby. So Rh antibodies aren't just in the plasma like naturally. They are only going to build up in the plasma if the person's blood is exposed. If the person who's Rh negative is exposed to Rh antigens on, if they, for example, if it's a mother who's Rh negative and the baby is Rh positive, then the mother is going to be exposed to Rh antigens on the baby's red blood cells. That is the only time that the mother's immune system will start producing anti-Rh antibodies. So she's not going to build up enough of them to hurt the first child, but she'll have them in her blood and they can attack the second child. So that is why they give the RhoGAM, is to prevent her from building up a large concentration of these anti-Rh antibodies. And again, this hemolytic disease of the newborn happens when the mother is Rh negative and then the child is Rh positive. Now, so that's red blood cells. Let's talk about white blood cells. Most are larger than red blood cells. The only ones that are about the same size are the lymphocytes. The white blood cells do have a nucleus and they do not have hemoglobin. They are important in the inflammatory response to an infection. There are 5 main types, and we've already looked at them. They're neutrophils, eosinophils, basophils, monocytes, and lymphocytes. The neutrophils are phagocytes. They phagocytize and digest or break down bacteria. They are also the first responders to an infection. They travel through the blood directly to the infection, and they multiply and begin to attack the infection first. Then there are basophils, which release histamine, and that histamine will draw other white blood cells to the site of infection. The eosinophils you're gonna have an increase in your eosinophils if you have worms or other parasitic infections. And monocytes are very large. They migrate into the tissues in response to infection, and once they get into the tissues, they become macrophages, which means big eater. So they can engulf a large amount of harmful substances, basically. They can phagocytize a large amount of bacteria or cells infected by virus or whatever. So they fight infection, they release growth factors that increase the division of white blood cells, so more white blood cells are being produced to fight the infection. They do a good job. They just are slower when they move, so they don't get to the infection as quickly as the neutrophils. The lymphocytes are the T cells and B cells, and they are involved in specific immunity and producing antibodies to a specific infection. Platelets are fragments of cells, and also known as thrombocytes, and they're involved in blood clotting. The actual blood clot consists of platelets, some red blood cells, and fibrin. And this just shows you the steps involved in a blood clot. First, you have damage to a blood vessel, and at the site of damage, the platelets are going to begin to stick to the exposed tissue and form a plug, and then fibrin threads are going to come in, and they're going to form, they're going to trap red blood cells and form a clot, so the bleeding is stopped. Blood capillaries are the smallest blood vessels, and red blood cells must go through single file because they are so small. And let's see, interstitial fluid that's inside lymphatic capillaries is called lymph. So lymph is found in lymphatic vessels and lymphatic capillaries, and it is returned to the systemic circuit through the subclavian veins.